Greg, was it encouraging that you saw some dip buying into the close there with some of the sectors turning green? And clearly there has been this mantra and this feeling on Wall Street that Fed's still going to be easy policy, even if we do start to see the taper. We've still got a ton of fiscal stimulus out there, and the economy is still doing relatively well, even with some of the headwinds we're dealing with.
Right. I don't know if I was encouraged or discouraged. I think we'll be volatile for at least the next couple of weeks. You know, we've just gone through an earnings season where 85% of companies that reported beat their earnings, and that has or beat their consensus, and that's been my thesis for a while, that consensus was underappreciating and underestimating what the earnings power of the companies were. You know, when I looked a couple of months ago, consensus in most sectors was 60 or 70% of pre-pandemic levels, and so, you know, it's an earnings season that we expected, and now the market's asking what's next. And so we're starting to hear rumblings again of the Fed tapering, or at least announcing tapering potentially this year. The market's going to look for some clarity about that at Jackson Hole. And as I indicated earlier, it's become almost indefensible that the Fed at this point can make an argument that easy monetary policy is still necessary to bring the labor market back to health. You know, we had pandemic low jobless claims numbers 2 weeks in a row here, absent a couple of data points in June and July. And we have 10 million plus, a record 10 million plus job openings, and only 9.2 million people who are underemployed or looking for employment. So I think we're going to see this for a while. I think we're going to see some back and forth until the market feels a strong direction from the Fed, as we are now doubting that they can continue this current posture.
Phil, we were discussing earlier the state of the consumer in light of consumer confidence, retail sales data. Do you still think the U.S. consumer is very strong?
Yeah, Wilfred, good to be with you here today. So the short answer is yes. In fact, we believe that the consumer is in the best shape that they've ever been in. If you look at where interest rates are, so borrowing costs, if you look at what has gone on in the stock market, so the wealth effect that people have shared, and also where you look at the jobs market. You know, the jobs market is really, really healthy right now. And Wilfred, the reason why that's important, if you get the U.S. consumer right, you can get growth right, you can get earnings right, because the U.S. consumer represents 70% of the U.S. economy. You add on top of that, Wilfred, just how accommodative financial conditions are. Again, financial conditions are the most accommodative they've ever been. And with what we know now about what we're seeing in the Delta variant cases, we would agree with Jerome Powell and what he said about it, that this U.S. economy is resilient to each additional wave. So all of that points to our overweight in stocks versus bonds in our multi-asset portfolios.
You're not worried about financial conditions, though, changing, Phil, if the Fed does begin to taper in the coming months?
Yeah, so Sarah, I love this question, and I'm going to hark back to 2013. Tapering isn't tightening. So unless we're wrong about inflation not being transitory and inflation having a 5 handle next year as well as this year, then, and if the Fed has to move up their tightening regime, so again, not tapering, but tightening, financial conditions are going to stay very, very accommodative, Sarah. So we're trying to delineate between tapering, which is priced in, and we all hope that they're tapering by the end of this year, because that probably means COVID is in the rearview mirror. So we're rooting for that. And we're distinguishing that from tightening monetary policy through the federal funds rate, which we still believe is a 2023 event, Sarah. So still a pretty nice runway for financial conditions.